Welcome to Cover Book Meet. I'm your host, Roger Nichols. This is author interview number 884, and we are in for a real treat today. I was lucky enough to meet Phil Marshall last month at the World Science Fiction Convention in Seattle, drawn to his booth by some superb artwork, stacks of advanced reader copies of his debut novel he was handing out, and Phil himself, who was a pretty gregarious character. Now, it's one of the perks of interviewing authors that occasionally you get a chance to get in on the ground floor with a debut novel of a writer destined for big things, and that is exactly the case here. And the more I found out about him, the more interesting he got. He's what we used to call a polymath, a person of wide-ranging knowledge and abilities. He has a medical degree, a master's of public health, 7 U.S. patents, twirls a mean drum major baton, and in his own words, builds technologies, organizations, and stories that imagine a fantastic future, which is a great segue into his debut novel, Taming the Perilous Skies. It is science fiction on a grand scale, full of that sense of wonder that draws fans to the genre. Very pleased to welcome Phil Marshall.
Thanks, Roger. It's great to be with you. So for your audience, there's the cover. I don't know how many are visually watching this versus listening, but I really appreciate the time with you today.
All right. And before we dive into Taming the Perilous Skies, I want to find more about you as a person. One of the questions I often ask authors is, were you always going to be an author? And if so, getting a medical degree and an MPH is not the usual first step.
Yeah, being trained as a surgeon is an unusual backdrop. And I've learned that especially this week when I'm at Novelists Inc., a conference for novelists, which is where I am right now. I don't usually have palm trees in my backdrop, but I'm in St. Petersburg, Florida. Your backdrop is usually what I have because the Columbia River Gorge is what that looks like. And I live on the Columbia River in Portland, Oregon. Like I literally live on an island on the Columbia River.
Selby Island, right?
I do. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly right.
All
Yeah,
right.
yeah. So, yeah, background on me. Yeah, the being trained as a surgeon was a long time ago, and I switched early in that career to technology, not because I didn't like surgery. I loved surgery. Although why I can't keep my own shoes tied is beyond me. But anyway, uh, but yeah, the but I switched to technology just simply because I felt in my gut like the web, which is what was taking hold then in '96, was going to transform healthcare. And I'm sorry to say that nothing has transformed healthcare. And boy, howdy, have I tried. My most recent effort, Conversa, we did well. We were the top conversational AI company in healthcare, conducting very clinical and very, very personalized conversations between doctors and their patients automatically. So automating those conversations. And when I sold that company in 2021, I went to complete Taming the Perilous Skies. And so I did that. And during that journey, then the bug bit again on being an entrepreneur. And that's when I founded Spoken, which is the AI audiobook company. And so this holiday season, Taming the Perilous Skies will come out as a stunning multi-voice audiobook. And I'm showcasing that technology here at Novelist Inc. for other novelists who want to make their work into great multi-voice audiobooks. But that's my journey. And if if you'd like, I can share a little bit about the journey to Taming the Perilous Skies specifically.
Absolutely. Please do so.
And and then at some point very soon here, I want you to share your experience in reading it because I don't get that because you're like one of the first 10 people who ever truly read the book.
Mhm.
And so I'm eager to get that. But the journey to Tame the Perilous Skies started on 9/11. Um, I was reading a tiny 120 word sidebar article inside the Discover magazine that I had picked up at O'Hare Airport, flying the morning of 9/11 to Philadelphia on a red eye from Portland Beach, Colorado to Philadelphia. And an idea came to me on that flight, which landed between when the first tower and the second tower was working.
Well,
And that idea is the theory of persistence. Um, the article was about the famous double slit experiment. but the variation in which one electron or photon at a time is put through the the gate,
Mhm.
and the pattern of light and dark bands of the double slit experiment still arise. And so that is a quintessential experiment for quantum mechanics, that shows, that was then concluded to be driven by the fact that every particle exists everywhere, and interferes with itself. And I, like Einstein before me, and most people looked at that and found that, to be just, illogical. And so I came up with the theory of persistence at that time, which I won't go into, but it results in this idea that, because all particle threads, electrons and photons, etc., exist as pathways or threads between their origin and their termination, and all particle pathways that have ever or will ever exist in all of time are interwoven into a timeless fabric, and that fabric wraps more densely around the pathways of planets and their moons and less densely between them, causing this differential force that we experience as gravity and interference of particles in time that we, describe through quantum mechanics. Um, that idea I wanted to bring to life. And so I knew that the only way to do that was to write an interesting story about it. I'm not a physicist. I don't have a lab. I'm not respected in the field. And that wasn't going to happen. Very few people know this. The very last math I took was algebra. I never took trigonometry or calculus. And the reason I didn't is because math just wasn't interesting to me. The why things are the way they are was interesting to me. How to reproduce them mathematically was boring to me. And so I never even though I graduated medical school, and you might think, oh, well, trig and calc are required for that. No, they weren't. I mean, I understand the general principles, but I never took it. And so, anyway, so this idea of persistence, my way forward on bringing it to life was through an interesting story, and I knew that very early on. And so in 2018, I got serious about the craft, and I was so fortunate to have, gone to several workshops that formulated my respect for, my knowledge of, and my um, my use of craft. Probably the most formative of that was Nancy Kress and Walter John Williams, of Tao's Toolbox. So I trained under them, and in that experience, well, first of all, Nancy says, I said, Nancy, I think that my biggest problem is characterization. I don't think my characters come to life. She said, that's not your problem. Your problem is nothing happens before chapter 7. For the love of God, man, make something happen. And I like my slow climb of world building, but she was right in that readers have to know there's something happening. So that's why I put those in media res scenes at the beginning of 1 and the beginning of 4, so that you can kind of shock the user and then get back, with the use of the marble as the segue, um, get back to what is daily life, right? And then build that world. I hope that balance works. I have heard from readers that that slow climb can be a put off. And I respect that. I've thought about it 1,000 ways to Sunday, but I still like starting it that way. So the point is that Taming the Perilous guys was driven by a true unified theory in physics that I came up with on September 11th, 2001. And I think now I've written an interesting story about it. And I'm influenced by the works of Andy Weir, Dan Brown, and that arc of discovery and puzzle and big scenes and big places, right? So the settings are just, they're not just big, they're spiritual, they're religious. It has big connotations. And so I've woven everything into this book that I've thought about as being a consequence of the theory of persistence, in what I hope will be a way that readers find delightful. Your reaction, was just put me on cloud nine. I mean, when I read yours, I'm like, that right there. And there's a guy who gets my references, and I'm guessing you didn't even get most of them. Even you didn't get most of them, which I hope people sort of uncover over time. There's a lot of little tricks in there.
Well, that's one of the things I noticed about it right away. In fact, I started running through because, unlike most people, I actually read the books, take notes as I go, And I've got a whole section of cultural, there are obvious cultural references to Star Wars and Harry Potter, and but you get some and Hercule Poirot, but you throw in some fun stuff here, and I have to mention a few of them because I did get a few
Yeah.
of them pulled together. Now, the title comes from a drum and bugle corps performance in 1992, and I found that online and watched it with the propeller spinning on the plane and everything. That thank you for that because I love things that send me to research to find out more. You also
Yeah.
put Dr. Munson Honeydew from the Muppets. One I really liked was Obama Arena stuck together to make Obama Arena, which somebody is going to have to use at some point. Um, and some of them you explain, like 42 being the life universe and everything. And I have to say that at this science fiction convention, my daughter's birthday was coming up. I got her a T-shirt that said, "We couldn't think of anything else, so we give you life, the universe, and everything" on a big 42 in the center of it. You mentioned the bean after the sculpture in Chicago. You maybe look up things like Zucchetto's skull caps worn by the clergy. You stage things in Milan with a whole sect of Catholicism I had never heard of before. So this is a whole bunch of stuff that I found that I thought you just have. Oh, by the way, I love the Bezos blabber as the Washington Post. You did that.
Yeah, that was a fun little. That was a last minute addition. I swear that one went in probably this year.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah.
Okay, now we should tell people the basic plot of this because I get too easy mind in the minutiae. We only got a few minutes left before I have to let you go. So here's how I see it, and you can correct me on this because I just read the thing. You have this philosophy science combination has led to anti-gravity that's practical and in huge use. There are hundreds of millions of airships in the sky at any time, and then it stops working. People fall out of the sky and they die. And this is the big problem that everybody tries to solve. You have some fabulous characters in there. And I am so looking forward to casting the movie for this because I would love to see old Doc Brown come out of retirement and play his titular sidekick there. It was overwhelming, wonderful, and it really kicks up. And you talk about the slow burn; it really kicks up in the second half. I was so glued to the page that one night it was 3 a.m. before I went to bed. But there you go. So yeah.
Oh, I love hearing that. I love hearing that. I think if people hear that the beginning is a bit of a slow climb, that every piece of it does matter to the story later, to stick with it. I hope that people will. That is still my biggest concern, as I said. And so, yeah, in 2076, the world has been transformed by a unified theory in physics from Brian Medlock and that very same man's invention of anti-gravity. We live a third of our lives up, and on that very morning, the aerial control grid controls all of the aerial activity. Over 7 billion flights a day of these autonomous, acting orbs, basically. Whether it's delivery eggs or passenger or large, all the way up to large hotels or what have you, hotels, in the rings of Saturn. Although this particular story takes place immediately just right here, right, and right around Earth. That malfunction causes older battery-powered aerials to fail. Just so happens that the poorer classes are generally in those class of vehicles. So it becomes where the backdrop is one of not just technological revolution, but socio-political revolution. That's what they refer to as the revolutions, in fact, where political and social barriers have broken down because of free trade and travel. Because of these technologies, climate crisis is receding, sea levels are receding. The Statue of Liberty has opened back up on this very day because of receding sea levels, and so it's a pretty utopian backdrop. Very little crime because of how people understand the fabric of the universe, and all of our actions, our intentions, all the things we say and do permanently now imprinted in that fabric. And organized religions accept that fabric as one and the same as God. And so even the religions of the world have accepted the fabric. They just believe that fabric has intentionality, that has a consciousness, that is God. And that, of course, brings up very key questions of free will versus determinism, intentionality versus not. And I do very deliberately go into that. I hope you enjoyed that
Oh,
aspect of it as well.
absolutely. And I find the fabric, as opposed to the force, just by its name, feels a little more static than the force, which feels more active. But the whole sense of permeating everything is a wonderful feeling about that. So I think you did a really good job in naming it. So, um,
Yeah, well, in fact, my friend Peter Zuckerman, who's a successful author, he was with me on the Oregon coast, and my title for the book was called The Fall. So the fall of 2076, the
mhm.
fall, and I was sharing an idea that I had, and that is from chapter 43, um, or 42, chapter 42, that Jack, the main character, has overheard a conversation in the White House theater by the 95-year-old inventor of anti-gravity, Brian Medlock, and his arch nemesis, John Wong, who only moments earlier they were at blows. And now they're yucking it up in the White House theater. Jack is about ready. The main character is about ready to lose his 9-year-old son in the reset. That's going to happen. He knows that's going to happen. He's not accepted it, but it's going to happen. So he hears this laughter in the White House theater, and he goes, he's fuming. So he overhears a conversation, and John Wong asks Brian Medlock, "What is it that made you want to make things fly?" And Brian Medlock relays the story at 11 years of age of going to this show in 1992 and plays a part of that show. And then the daughter of the president asks, "What was the name of the show?" And tearfully, Brian Medlock says, "Taming the Perilous Skies." And Zhang Wang says, "Well, my old friend, have we tamed these perilous skies?" And Medlock replies tearfully, "It appears that we have not." And this is after 47 million people have died. And so when I relayed that passage to Peter, he said, "My God, man, that's your title." You
Yes,
know? I
absolutely.
said, I said, okay, so then I embraced that title. It is the perfect title. And would you believe that not but 2 days ago, in my final episode of Taming the Perilous Skies, 100 Days to Watch, my docuseries that I've been doing weekly, I interviewed the performers of the 1992
Oh,
cadets of Bergen County,
you're kidding me. Oh, how wonderful. How'd you track them
the
down?
the drum major, the head euphonium, the head
Oh,
mellophone
geez.
player, and so I was beside myself. I was so thrilled, and so basically I read the passage. We played that clip of the opening of that show, and then the rest of the hour was just spent recalling their memories of that summer. And I didn't know that show, which looks so perfect on the field, and these groups are so finely tuned from the beginning of the season. I mean, they know exactly they're learning the show, but they're improving the show. But it is so good at that level. It is so good from day one. They were a train wreck at the beginning of 1992. They are a complete disaster, and they just worked their butts off. 14 hours of rehearsal a day until they brought that show to life. And I'm like, man, you talk about persistence. That's persistence.
Absolutely. That later. So one of the things that I love about this is not only do you have interesting characters, but you have one of the best, what do they call it, trailers for this book I've ever seen. It is absolutely, and with your permission, I'll include it in this.
Yeah, absolutely.
There hadn't been a single aerial incident in years, despite 7.2 billion flights every day. And flying to the Oak Ridge National Laboratory for his science class? How cool is that?
what is the true meaning of this day? Is this day a punishment for our sins? Is it punishment for allowing technology to play too important a role in our lives? If only we could see the future. But we cannot see the future.
Oh, one of my favorites is you quote John Gillespie McGee Jr.'s "Slip the Surly Bonds of Earth from High Flight," one of my favorite all-time poems. And sadly, he was killed just a few months after he wrote that in 1941. But
I actually, I've got to admit that I drew it from Ronald Reagan's speech after the Challenger disaster. And so thank you for that reference. You've just added to my knowledge base.
okay.
So yeah.
He was an American who was flying for the Canadian Air Force in Britain, and he was describing his in a Spitfire, which is one of the best planes of the war, and in terms of people who know that stuff, apparently. So let's see, what else have I got here? Oh my gosh, so many things I did on this. One of the things that I think is the president's daughter definitely deserves more. She's a brief character in it, and she is so alive with just these short passages that I'm certainly hoping she's going to be in book number 2.
She is. The book number 2 takes place 50 years later, and we learn a lot about what the actual cause was. Because at the end of this book, you're like, what? You're left with some very big options on what the true culprit was, right? And in book 2, you learn what that is, and it's profound. And Kavi, I loved writing Kavi. My God, the scene in chapter 2 with Kavi and Brian Medlock, I absolutely adore. And although I will say this, I've been criticized for making her too precocious, and I think that that's a fair criticism. It is aggressive on her character, but I do love her. And you're right, she does deserve more. She did deserve more. I'm sorry, Kavi. Next time, you're my girl.
Not only that, but I get vibes of there've been strong teenage feminine heroines in science fiction. I think of Podkane Mars, for instance, and some of the other stuff that had been written by Andre Norton. So,
well, she does save the day. So,
yes.
So at the end of that very scene where they're reciting the 1992 Cadet Show and they're reciting all that, at the end of that, she has an idea that saves the day.
Yep.
And that's what sets up chapter 43, which you love so much. Can I tell you about chapter 43 in the Ferrari scene?
Yes, because this is the one that I love.
Okay. So I got a review back, right, from a very thoughtful reader, and she said, I really, enjoyed all of it. She said the only thing I didn't enjoy was the Ferrari scene because it seemed packed. And I thought to myself, boy, I don't think that scene is packed. But I can understand why they thought that. Here we were building tension. Will Jack be able to save his son? Right. And then all of a sudden I throw a Medlockian chapter in there that's just ridiculous. Right. And so slapstick and I can be a bit slapstick. Right. And I was inspired by Monty Python. I met Jonathan Cleese once at Kramer's bookstore on DuPont Circle in Washington, D.C. I shall never let that moment go for the rest of my life. And I'm such a big airplane movie fan, and just tongue in cheek. And by the way, did you get the airplane movie reference?
I got the reference. It's not that kind of flying, or I can't get the exact word.
All together.
Yes. And I said, I know. It took me a moment. I'll give you that. It took me a moment, but no, I did get that.
It's a different kind of flying altogether.
Yeah.
It's a different kind of flying they sent together.
And I almost came back with this. I picked a hell of a week to give up smoking or various other substances.
I almost thought about, this is a terrible week to give up amphetamines, and so yeah, I didn't add that into the movie, but I didn't think about it.
Yeah. We have taken a lot of your time this morning. You've been very generous with us, but I really want to thank you for putting together something. I'll have to say, to me, science fiction, I've been reading it since the 50s, and some of it just doesn't do it for me anymore. I need that sense of grandeur. I need large themes and whatnot. And this takes me back to some of the stuff that Heinlein and Clark and Asimov were writing, major big themes about big things that happen, and yet characters you care about. So I have to say, this is one of the best I've read in a long, long time.
Oh, Roger, that fills my heart. You're wind in my sails.
Yeah.
Spread the word. It's for sale. Friends and family, pretty much the only ones that bought it so far. So,
Mm.
so, let's spread the word. I will say that everybody who's read it has enjoyed it. It is a big idea at its heart,
Mm.
but it's also a story with heart. I hope.
Oh,
I hope it sounds like you found. And it's also, people ask me, oh, is it another downer? No, it starts utopian, it becomes catastrophic, and then it's hopeful at the end.
yes. You, you,
So yeah.
you have to sing them out. You have to give them something to go walk out of the theater with or out of the close the book with. Well, that's the last question I'll ask you then. What do you hope they take away from this when they close the book?
I hope that readers will think differently, more broadly, and more positively about the universe and our place in it.
Well said. Well said indeed. Our guest today has been Phil Marshall. The book is Taming the Perilous Skies. Go buy multiple copies right now for all your friends and relatives. Christmas is coming, and this would make a perfect gift. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Thanks, Roger.